Hello and welcome to the Stockyard Industrial Lead. I'm Eric Miller, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about operations through street crossings. And I'm going to take you through some of the things that I do on my layout, and this might maybe give you some ideas of how to handle different types of street crossings depending on how intense traffic is on your street. Now, I want to kind of I'll give you a caveat in the beginning. This is probably not 100% prototypical, but I feel that some of the things I do are close, or at least based on prototype. But I understand that the railroad may have different rules that I won't explain, or more specific stuff. But I think these kind of highlight some of the main things that I see out there on the railroads and that are helpful. So, and also are very interesting operationally, so that your crew kind of gets engaged and and has fun running your trains, because that's kind of what it's all about. So anyways, this is a basic overview of how I handle some of my street crossings on a small switching layout. Today we're going to be switching the Millard refrigerated customer, and so I'm going to be spotting this one reefer at the industry. And I've already checked in with the industrial foreman, and I've also checked the lockbox here that tells us where to spot this car. The customer wants it at door B, and looking at the track diagram, that's that center door. So we'll have to move that car out of the way first. Now, Millard Refrigerated is located right here by a street crossing. So this requires some intense movement back and forth crossing the street. Now, like I said, there's different ways to handle this. One of the easiest that I find, that I've got a couple on my layout, is to just build a bridge. That takes the traffic off your railroad. You don't have to worry about it. Well, that's nice, but you also, there's a lot of street crossing examples out there. And so you're going to have to contend with this depending on, what your layout prototype might be. And so, again, kind of similar to a bridge, there's going to be varying degrees of traffic. Now, some you might have hardly any auto traffic at all. Might be more of a private crossing, and in that case you might just have a simple street and a couple of cross bucks that says railroad crossing and that sort of thing, and you just blow your horn through there. Now, some of these other ones that might have a little bit more traffic, if you're like me and your layout is in an urban setting, you might have a little more traffic. And so this example here with Washington Street is one of them. And so what I did is I installed a signaling system here, which I think is kind of cool, because since I don't have automatic block signals on the railroad, I wanted to do something that's kind of interesting like this, and it was pretty easy to set up. So I basically have two different functions on these traffic signals, which are Walthers. I have it for auto traffic or rail traffic. It's also a center off, but I usually don't use that. So this will give the trains a yellow approach signal, and then the crew can turn it back to auto traffic when they're done, which will give the trains a red stop signal. And so again, I've seen this used, especially here in the Denver area where I live. There's a few examples of this where their crew controls it. The nice thing about this is it works out really well for an industry like Millard Refrigerated, where you might want to occupy this for a little bit if you're just going to back up again, and you just want to keep traffic clear for a little while. You don't want to keep it clogged too long, but just long enough. So that's one example. Before we switch this industry, I'll show you a couple other examples that I use on my layout. So another example is the warning flashers, essentially at a crossing. And so this is pretty common, right? You see these a lot. Now, usually you'll have these only at, again, kind of high traffic areas where you've got a lot of traffic coming through, and you want some kind of lighted detection, right? So what I have it set up here right now is, since this is, just a pretty sparse industrial spur with only one train, I wanted to have it crew controlled, right? So I have a switch down here where they can turn it on or off. I don't have them set to flashing yet, but that's an improvement I want to make at some point. But right now the lights are just on or off. So the train is supposed to stop here. The conductor comes out, switches it on, then it moves. Then once the train is passed, they turn it back off. That's how this one works. But this is a good one to use for, again, a kind of a little more heavier traffic street crossing, where you might need some kind of lighted signal to alert motorists that, hey, there's a railroad crossing here. But what about one that's maybe not as heavily trafficked? Well, I'll show you my third and final example here on the layout. So this example is 36th Street, which is a street that doesn't see a ton of traffic, and so there's no signaling at all. What I will need to do eventually, once I get around to scenery, which will include getting the street to look a little bit better, is put some crossbucks up here. So you need that to alert the motorist. But otherwise, there's no signaling at all. So what does the railroad do for this? Well, it's pretty easy, because when you're coming through, the train doesn't have to stop at all. It just does the normal 2 longs, a short and a long, to come through. And so I'll kind of give an example. This OL&B switcher, 25 tonner, would just do that going through this direction. But what if you are going the other direction and you don't have a locomotive in the lead? What I tell my crews to do in my employee timetable is that if they're doing a reverse shove where the locomotive is not in the lead, they need to flag the crossing. And this is something that's pretty commonly done. A lot of crews will use flares. You might have a crew member stand out by the tracks with, waving a red flag, essentially. And so that's what I do. Now, I don't have a crew figure that I put on for my operations. But what I do is I give the crew a little flag that I got at a restaurant. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. They'll stick it in your whatever you're eating, and so you can just pick this up and take it home. And so I find that helpful, because it's a visible signal. It's something that the crew must do, is place the flag by the crossing, and that basically also sends the message that, hey, cars, look out, here comes a train. So then once the flag is in place, then the crew can reverse shove through the crossing just like that. And then after the movement is done, the conductor picks up the flag, and the street can then be used for automobiles again. So that's a pretty simple way, and I think it's kind of cool, because it adds some interesting operations elements to it too. And you get some more hands-on stuff for the crew. So that's the very basic design of a street crossing here on the Stockyard Industrial Lead. I think this is a pretty common one too. So that's basically what I do. Again, there might be some different prototype rules here that I'm not enforcing 100% correctly, but I think it's pretty close, and it's what I see going on out there when I watch locals move their trains. And again, it adds some fun for the crew. So now let's go back to our Millard refrigerated customer and switch that, and see what kind of specific stuff we get into with that crossing. So one of the nice things about having a crossing like this that's signalized is you don't have to worry about some of the rules that I just mentioned there back at 36th Street, where you have the flags, and what if you're coming through with an engine versus reverse shoving. So it's all protected by the signal. So it's pretty simple. So we've got the crew here, so let's go ahead and throw to the rail traffic. We'll stop any street traffic that's coming up, and we'll start to move. Now, the one thing I do instruct crews is to still obviously blow the horn as they're going through the crossing. Even though it's protected by a signal, just like as if it had the flashers, you still want to alert motorists that, hey, there is a train, so you have both the visual and the audible part of that. Now, one thing I forgot to do is leave my caboose behind, so I'm going to have to do that real quick. And I'm just going to, actually, let me think. It's always fun to operate on the fly, isn't it? I think actually what I'm going to do is, since we have to grab this car out of the way that's at spot A, we're just going to pull that out first. Okay. Now, what about when you're backing up at a street crossing? Do you use the horn or not? This is something that I uh, find slightly conflicting with myself. Sometimes I will just go ahead and blow the horn, especially when you've got a situation like this where the locomotive is pretty close to the caboose anyway. So you might as well just try to alert the motorist that, hey, a train is coming. Take our blue flag out of the way. But that is one thing that I could see arguments for both. And again, I'm not sure what the 100% prototypical rule is for a railroad, but I think that one of the wise things to do is just to think, well, if I could go ahead and blow the horn and be safe, then I'll go ahead and do that. Okay. Now let's connect our hoses. There we go. So again, you'll notice that I've kept the signal red for the auto traffic during this time. I find that it's a short enough time from when I cross to when I'm going to cross again, so I'll just leave it that way for a while. And then this case that you'll see here, I especially want to keep the crossing red. Well, went a little fast there. I was gonna leave the train actually on the crossing. So in that situation, you most definitely want to keep the crossing red for the autos coming through. So let's drop off our caboose. The other reason I wanted to do that was then it makes it a lot easier because you don't technically have to blow for the crossing again if you're already, occupying that crossing. Another thing that I like to do in this area is sometimes I'll keep ringing the bell for the platform. You see we've got some rail fans up there. So I want to make sure they know that the train is coming. So a lot of times I'll ring the bell for the crossing as well as the platform, just to be safe. And try to find that balance between not being too annoying with the bell and the horn, but being safe. And again, I'll go ahead and blow the whistle for the crossing. Since we can. Now, while we're at the industry, this is going to take some time. So as the conductor, I'll go ahead and switch this back to auto traffic while we position the freight car. And, while we're here, we might be meeting with the foreman or somebody at the industry. So I'll just go ahead and do that. I accidentally put the brake in emergency, so now the sound has to start over again. Okay, so we got that out of the way. As our engineer is pulling up the locomotive, go ahead and switch back to rail traffic there and stop the cars. One thing I'll note that I try not to do with my crews is to, kind of be like the railroad police with them and say, hey, you didn't use your horn here or there. I might gently suggest, like, hey, you might want to use your horn here, that sort of thing. But I try not to be the railroad police with them because I realize that part of it is having fun, and I'm a little bit at their mercy since they're coming over to operate my layout. So just maybe a little pro tip there for your crews is try not to be too hard on them with the rules. If they forget their bell with the horn or, stuff like that. I have had crews that have been like really bad with following some of the rules. So I figure if a crew can at least observe something, or most of my like operating rules, then that's great. And also, if you're too hard on your crews about stuff like that, and then they're not having much fun, they might think, well, we're not going to come back to that layout again. So you kind of want to be a little easygoing on them so that they have a good experience and they really want to come back. So. And again, for anybody who's maybe watching for the first time on this layout, I've got the proto throttle here, which works out really well for an industrial switching layout, I think. And I've got the locomotive set to use acceleration and deceleration, or also known as momentum. Which adds an interesting operating element as well. So just thought I'd point that out. So we'll bring this boxcar, or reefer as it were, I guess, or insulated boxcar perhaps, back to the door spot C, and our work here will be done. Perfect. Okay. And since that was a pretty short move, I went ahead and kept the signal red for the cars. I'll wrap things up here at the industry. I'll close the box. The blue flag back. And the best part about this industry is it's right next to our yard office. So the crew is already home. So the last thing we'll do is switch it back to the auto traffic, and we'll flip the switch back so it's on the main line. And then the one thing I forgot to do was to unlock and lock the turnout. But again, I think I observed most of the rules here for my crew today, so I did pretty good overall. And hopefully I'll be invited back again. But anyways, yeah, that's basically how the street crossings work on my layout. Those are just a few examples. You've got, like I mentioned, you've got bridges, you've got some pretty high traffic areas that require some sort of signaling, and then you've got the low traffic areas that just need a set of crossbucks. And there's different rules that are associated with each one, and different things that you can have your crew do. So, and I think the main thing is to try to have fun with the crew, or add fun, add some operational interest, and try not to make things too rules heavy, so that the crew likes it, and it's also easy for them to understand and digest. So that's all I wanted to show you today on the Stockyard Industrial Lead. Thanks for watching, and feel free to comment below if you have any questions, and also let me know, as always, if there's anything else you want to see on future videos. Thanks again, and I will catch you next week.